Welcome to the Astral Tourist Podcast. Today we're dropping right into an intriguing astral exploration where not one, but two UFOs from the Titan Nebula make an unexpected appearance. I had only wanted to take a quick astral spin around my neighborhood when I found myself navigating through a parallel dimension and maybe even a future timeline. I was using the wake back to bed method when I fell back asleep early this morning around 7:35 a.m. Normally I would get up by 7:30 a.m., but I wanted to try astral projecting one last time, even if it was a short one. Instead, I was just sleeping again when some spinning and swaying sensations got me feeling lucid. So I was just sleeping. I had missed the window, I thought, and I was feeling a lot of spinning and swaying, a little bit of slight nausea. Nothing to worry anyone about, but I was kind of in the middle of some stuff there. And I woke up in the vibrational stage. I felt like I was waking up is how it felt, even though I was still asleep and I was in the vibrational stage. And in this stage, you can experience all kinds of feelings and states. So I recognized that I was just maybe a little confused because of all the different feelings and the spinning and everything. But I was definitely in the vibrational stage. And my astral body was laying in bed filled with bright golden light. Normally, I don't focus on myself because that's a good way to stay in your body. Don't do that. But I somehow had decided to look at myself, which I should not have done, and I was bright and golden. I decided to astral project as planned, but only for a quick spin around the neighborhood, since I knew I had to get up soon. So I was sticking to my original plan. Sometimes I like to peek in on a beautiful garden one of my neighbors has in the astral that she doesn't have here in the physical. I'll put a link in the description to that episode. It's called Astral Travel from a Secret Garden to a Cafe Job and Fun Astral Games. It's amazing what your neighbors can get up to in the astral, and they probably don't even remember it themselves. Who knows? I don't know her well enough to ask her if she ever had dreams about gardening. So remembering not to look at myself for too long and admire the golden light, this time I noticed my bedroom window appeared behind my bed. I've seen it there in the astral before, even though in the physical it's on the other side of the room. It's not behind my bed in the physical at all. When it's behind the bed in the astral, it's also thicker and more difficult to phase through. So I rolled out of my physical body this time, even though that's normally not my favorite method. And you can see my favorite methods in my guide that I made. But this time I decided to try a rollout, and it worked really well. So I rolled out. I made a big motion with my, let me see, which leg? One of my legs. I made a big motion with it, which got me going. And I rolled. And I was just like getting reoriented. I remember having to do some weird shifting around. But then I put my hand through the window in slow motion. Because I've already experienced this window in other astral projections. I know that it's difficult to try to just go through it directly. I have another video about different ways to go through windows and walls, but with this particular one, I've noticed that just going really slowly at a slower vibration works best. And also, I did not focus on the window itself, which is a good tip for any windows in the astral. If you focus on the barrier, you might get stuck in it, so don't do that. And it was difficult not to focus on the window this time, because it was glowing. It was beautiful white color. It had these little bumps and things in it. It was very fascinating. I wanted to look at it, but I remembered not to. And you should remember not to look at your windows too if you're trying to go through them. So I simply focused on getting outside to my target locale for a quick look around the neighborhood. I kept the main goal in mind, and so should you when you're practicing. Soon the rest of my golden astral form followed my hand. Remember, I'm going in super slow motion. That's the way this window works. And I made some distance from that window. I remember getting out, making some distance, but not as much as I wanted to. My target locale is over a lake, and I never got there. And that's okay if you don't get to yours either. Just the fact of having one will help you go. Okay, that gets you astral projecting, and you can make adjustments from there. So as I floated from the window about 20 feet away, I noticed a strange heaviness that was stronger than usual. I allowed myself to drop, almost like a paratrooper, but I didn't fully descend. Instead, I hovered about 5 feet above the ground, and this was just all like automatic. My astral body was making all of these autonomous movements, just getting oriented and getting used to the area and the space and the dimension. When I looked at myself again using 360 vision, I appeared like a glowing golden blob of water at first. I was really kind of ambiguous there. I then rose back up into the air, gradually reforming into a more misty, humanish kind of shape. I say humanish because I was still also kind of fluidic, actually, which was really cool. I don't mind being fluidic, so I was a misty, fluidic, humanish shape. The sky, I noticed, was still pre-dawn, with delicate hints of orange and violet painting the horizon. As I took in the view, I spotted a saucer-shaped UFO flying overhead. It was the familiar silver-gray saucer people often report, with spinning white lights in the center. I've seen a few of these myself in the astral. It's not my first go-around here, but it still really surprised me just to see it going by so fast. And I was still getting, oriented into the space. It passed so quickly that I almost questioned what I had seen. I was like, wait, what? Did I really see a UFO? Where am I? Is this my neighborhood still? And it was. I was still in my neighborhood, but a very different version, I think. And then I'm looking around with all my extra astral spidey senses like on fire, I noticed a second one flying from an entirely different direction, but it looked identically the same to that first one. It was that saucer formation and shape and all of that. I had a clearer view of the second one for a little longer. They were unmistakably the silver gray flying saucer UFOs. No doubt whatsoever in my mind at all, especially after seeing the second one and having a little bit longer to observe that one. It was still moving really fast, but it was coming from like a further distance away, and my spidey astral senses were on fire, and so I know what I saw. That's all I can say. So that one also disappeared from sight fairly quickly because, again, moving so fast. So I decided to take a full 360-degree view from the air, really concentrating on the scenery and trying to figure out where I was exactly again, and just going through the motions to explore the area. And the first thing that struck me as odd was a tall white mountain in the distance. It reminded me a little bit of Mount Fuji, but where the lake should have been, there was nothing. This is Lake Champlain I'm talking about. The lake was completely missing. And for the new folks that don't know, because I have a lot of new subscribers, thank you for joining. I don't live in Japan or anywhere near Mount Fuji. I'm in the USA. I don't believe that it was Mount Fuji at all. It just reminded me of it. I wonder if it was some alternate version of a mountain called Mount Mansfield, which is the tallest peak in Vermont. That's a mountain that is sometimes visible from where I live here on the East Coast, USA, and gets plenty of snow. It looked way more like Mount Fuji to me than Mansfield, but Mansfield is my actual best potential guess because I was in my neighborhood even though it was like a weird version of it. So as I rose higher, I noticed that there were far more buildings than in my neighborhood here in the physical world. The area was much more developed. I wondered if I had somehow entered a parallel dimension or even a future timeline. Perhaps both, some mix of both is what I was thinking about, but I didn't know. I was still looking around, exploring. When I ascended even higher to get an even better view and get more information, the colors around me shifted, and I could only make out bright purple outlines of the buildings. So I descended partway to bring them back into view. So that's an indication that there is a dimensional barrier there. And I did not want to cross it because I wanted to explore where I was way more. I mean, so exciting. 2 UFOs going by like that. Everything's different, even though it's still my neighborhood. I was going to stick around to explore. But yes, in liminal space, and that I was happy I wasn't going too fast up in there, because if you go a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time, you can kind of see where the dimensional barriers are actually. And so you can make a decision from that point. And so when things shifted like that, I knew I was like on the fringe, the fringe of being luminal, actually maybe being in liminal space, not luminal. I'm going back into the experience and I'm doing that speech thing I do. Anyway, I decided to go back. As I was observing the buildings as I descended a little bit lower, I noticed that one of the 3 or 4-story buildings had a rounded beige roof with golden lights glowing in it, kind of shooting out from it, but not super shooting like lasers, just, there was light coming from it. And that's one of the things you can look for if you're newer to astral projection and you want to try and find where people are. Look for things that are lit up. That's a good tip. So I aimed for it and began a slow and careful descent. I remembered before that I had to drop down and then reorient. So I knew that things were, navigating gravity and the area was maybe a little bit tricky. Perhaps I was still coming in too quickly as my astral body autonomously spun around 3 times counterclockwise, albeit very gracefully, like a dancer. And it was an odd sensation that, that autonomy just kicked in. But it caused me to land very gently in front of the larger building I had targeted. So this isn't a skyscraper. It's just, 3 to 4 stories tall at the most, and it was lit up. So that's where I was going to find out more. As I touched down, I noticed a few booths and tents set up outside for some kind of event, maybe a fair, though there were no rides in sight. In one area, there was a large open tent lit up with 2 performers in costumes doing a presentation. I couldn't make out their language, so I drifted in closer to their tent. One had a dark, bird-like mask that I think was meant to resemble a raven, but with a particularly long nose. Could have been a different vulture of some kind, I'm not sure. I couldn't figure out what the other one was wearing at all, but it might have been something like a beaver costume. I could tell it was furry, and the way he was moving, he was being kind of blurry. Like he would do these really quick movements that I could only observe as blurs. So I never really got a full-on view of him completely, because I was looking at the whole area and trying to decide what to do next, who to speak with, what else is going on around me, and all of that. I was bustling around in my head, my astral head and spidey senses, and are there more UFOs? And there weren't right there, but, that was my thinking. I'm still just kind of like, well, what should I do next? I still couldn't make out the language they were speaking or telepathing in as I came in closer. Now, sometimes proximity helps, so there's a tip for you. It doesn't always, but sometimes it does. And also sometimes holding hands or hugging somebody helps, but never do that without permission. Touching in the astral is a big no-no. without permission because it can disrupt someone's energy. So always get permission first and let them make the choice. And this one time I remember instead of holding hands, they wanted to touch foreheads, like just third eyes. And I was all for that, and that worked great. And I could hear him a lot better. So continuing with this journey, there weren't many people around, so I decided to take my chances and interrupt the performance. I mean, there was nobody there. I mean, the whole place was lit up, but there was nobody there listening to the performance. So I was hoping it was just a practice session maybe, since there was no crowd for them to perform for. I drifted slowly closer to the one with the raven mask, because I love ravens personally, and I didn't know what the other one even was. So I drifted closer to the one with the raven mask and telepathed, "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but do you know anything about those flying saucers that just went by?" He responded, "Oh, those are our visitors from the Titan Nebula." He definitely didn't seem surprised at all by their presence there. I thanked him for the information and woke myself up, reciting the entire encounter to myself as I did. I could tell I'd be waking up soon anyway and didn't want to risk forgetting any details. Upon waking, I felt the familiar pins and needles sensation, which often happens when I returned from an astral projection. It was around 8:10 a.m. I had been astral projecting for about 35 minutes. The experience felt like it lasted between 35 minutes to an hour in the astral at the most. I'm thinking like 50 minutes in the astral, maybe it was an hour. Sometimes there's more time dilation that happens, but there wasn't that much this time, which I found very curious. In the future and parallel types of astral experiences I've had before, I often have way more time dilation. So this is some closer dimension to our physical world than I would have expected, I think. Considering my mind translated the experience as best as it could, and given that I'm not aware of any Titan Nebula in our own physical reality here, I believe it must actually refer to the visitors being from an immense interstellar cloud formation. These are vast regions of gas and dust that span across space. I generally associate Titans with something gigantic in size. For example, the Orion Nebula is approximately 25 to 30 light years across. I did a little bit of digging and found that 1 light year is about 5.88 trillion miles. Perhaps the visitors were from the Orion Nebula, but your guess is as good as mine. A brief internet search also confirmed for me that there have been several UFO sightings reported in and around Mount Mansfield, Vermont. Who knew? Well, I didn't, but I was beginning to suspect after I woke up, I have to say. Thanks for tuning in to today's astral journey. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and share. It really helps the channel grow. Have you ever had a strange encounter in the astral world, or perhaps your very own UFO sighting? Astral or not? Please let me know in the comments. Until next time, happy astral travels.